Welcome to the House of Literature in Bergen, in Norway. We are going to have an interview with Shahrnush Parsipur. Can't see her still now. There we have you. Good evening or good morning for you to you in the States, Mrs. Shahrnush Parsipur. We are so delighted to have you here with us in Norway, in Bergen. And unfortunately, the current global situation with COVID-19 limits travel activities for most of us. But we are glad that we can talk to you from the screen from California and the US. And the occasion of the interview today is the newly published translation of your book, Zanan bedune merdan, Kvinner, uten menn, into Norwegian. And this will be a meeting actually between the author and her translator. I would like to start the interview with some questions about yourself before we talk about the book, the historical and political situation it describes, the various female characters in it, and their destinies. You would also be pleased to hear you read a passage from the book in Persian, and I will follow up with my Norwegian translation of the same passage. Ultimately, we will talk about women's situation in Iran today and your thoughts about the future of Iran and your people. The literature is an excellent gateway to getting to know a new culture. So, Mrs. Parsipur, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background. You as the author, your life, your background, other works you have done. You have a very interesting background, I know. You have been in France, you have studied exotic language, and you have worked in the radio in Iran. The floor is yours. Please tell us about you.
Yes. I was born in Teheran from my father, who was from Shiraz, and my mother from Tehran. My birthday is on February 17, 1946. So now I am 75 years old.
Congratulations. I'm glad to that you are in such a ship shape. Yes.
I write from the age 14 until now. I have some novels, some short stories, some memoirs, and this is it.
Oh, we're going to talk more about the books too. But I know that your mother had background from the Qajar dynasty. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, because I talked a little bit about Persian literature before and said about the Qajar dynasty when literature somehow bloomed up again. And but you lived in Tehran with your mother. Your father, was that he left from Tehran? Was it true?
No, we were in Tehran, then we went to Khorramshahr, south of Iran. Mm-hmm. And for 10 years, more than 10 years, we were there. And then after that, I went back to Tehran because I wanted to go to university.
Yes. So you were, for some time, you lived
I was alone and I separated from my family.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
I separated from my family.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But you studied in Tehran, and then you left from Tehran, and you studied somewhere else afterwards, didn't you?
No, I was in Tehran, and after some years, I went to France. Mm-hmm. After my marriage and my divorce, I went to France, and there I tried to learn Chinese language.
I'm impressed.
And French also.
Because I know that you also have translated some books, so I think you know very many languages, don't you?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I haven't any talent for learning the languages. I knew French very well, but now I forgot it because I don't speak French nowhere.
Yes, we have to practice language in order not to forget it, yes. But when did you start writing? At what age did you start writing?
At the age 14, I tried to write. At the age 16, I published my first short story in an Iranian woman magazine. And then after that, I wrote and I published here and there.
Yes, these literary magazines were the place where very many in Iran started publishing their work. Was that right?
Yes.
And you are also the second woman in Iran who wrote a novel. Simin Daneshvar was the first one, and you were the second, aren't you?
Yes. We are the first person who published their books.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's someone else. The woman wrote some novels, but we were the first one.
Yeah. And the first novel that you published, that was the Sag and the Zemistan Boland, the Dog and the Long Winter.
Dog and the Long Winter.
Yes. Could you tell us something about the book and the reaction after that book?
Unfortunately, it hasn't a lot of success. Because when I published a book, it was the censorship. They don't permit to publish it, and they jam kardan kitaba ro.
They took it from they were not allowed to sell it anymore in the bookshop, so it was confiscated.
Yeah. This book had not any chance.
No. Okay. But the book still exists, doesn't it? It has been published and translated too.
Pardon?
The book, the first novel that you wrote, this Dog and the Long Winter, it has been translated into English recently?
Yes, there is 2 translations of the book. One is in my website, and another one is in England that my daughter-in-law translated and published.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's good. But I know that you in Iran, in addition to writing, you did other things too. You were working in a radio station in Iran as well, didn't you?
I worked in television. And I was the producer of a program for the rural woman. And I had a very successful program, and then I resigned because of the execution of 2 persons and arrestation of some others. And I lost my job.
Yes, because there were writers, those who were imprisoned and also were executed, and you protested against the Savak and the Shah's system at that time, and when you resigned from your job. Yes, and how was the reaction to that? That you resigned, that you didn't want to continue working for the Iranian television company?
They arrested me, the Savak.
Okay.
I was in prison for 54 days. After that, they released me, and I published my book and left the country.
Yes. And
I went to France.
Yes, please. And you left the country. Then you left for France. Was that so? You left for France at that time, or for England first?
Yeah, no, for France.
For France, yes. And then you started learning Chinese in France when you came there, you said.
Yes.
Yeah. And you were in France, was that, at what time was it? Which year was that then?
It was in 1976, I think.
Yes, so that was still when the Shah was at his power, yes. But,
yes.
Yeah. But you returned, but you for a long time in France?
4 years.
4 years, okay, yeah. And you returned to Iran after the revolution had started, or when the tumults started?
Yes, I went back to Iran because I wanted to be my country and with all the people of Iran.
Yes. And the book that we are going to talk about, this Women Without Men, زنان بدون مردان, that had you wrote this in parts first, didn't you? This was not a novel at the beginning.
No, there was some short stories that I wrote them. Then, because all the character of these short stories went to carriage, I tried to connect them with each other and make a novella.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah. We're going to talk much more about the book. I think it's interesting that you started doing this as short stories first and that you published the short stories, because we can see some traces in the book that these have been separated stories first. Because and I think that is quite. I like the idea because it shows us something about the history of the book. I have seen that some of the other translators in the other languages have taken out these things, because when you in one of the stories again somehow introduce some of the ladies that we have learned to know in the beginning of the book, then I think this shows that this has been a separate story that has been published by itself, that it can stand on its own feet somehow. So I like the idea, and then you have connected it. We're going to talk about the film afterwards too, because I think there is some connection there as well, being parts and then being connected. Well, let's go into the book now. You have given it a very special title, زنان بدون مردان, Women Without Men. How did this title come up, and why the political context? Can you tell us more about the title and the political context it describes when all this happens? What happened in Iran at that time?
Ernest Hemingway has a book. Its name is Men Without Women. Yeah. When I read this book, I thought it's not bad to write something about women without men. And in this book, Hemingway shows the men who are not capable to find a good relation with a woman. So I thought, okay, I reversed it. And I made the woman that they are not capable to find a good relation with the men. So this is the reason of the name of the book.
Yes. Yeah. And this, the story happens in Iran in the 1950s. I'm not sure everybody here in the audience or our Norwegian public knows what happened in Iran in the 1950s. The situation around when this, in the first stories or in the second story where we meet Faiz and we meet Munes. Tell us about the historical context of the book.
It's a moment that CIA made a coup d'etat in Iran against Dr. Mossadegh, Prime Minister of Iran. And this story is very important for the Iranian because they liked Dr. Mossadegh, and he was the man who nationalized petroleum.
Yes.
So it was very important for the people. And after that, they hated Shah of Iran. And when he lost his power at the moment of Khomeini, in reality, the people thought about Dr. Mossadegh.
Yes, that the situation that happened in 1950s was somehow again actualized when the revolution happened in Iran in 1978-79. So the old story about Mossadegh was somehow vitalized again, and it So this is the political context of your book. And interesting that the title of the book has a connection to Hemingway and that you turned it around. And But the idea about writing about these women, and where did that come from? Was that because women were interesting for you because you had already worked with the role of women in the television company? You said you had producer of this series. So was that? So why did you write about these women as such?
Yes. When I was 5 years old, it happened something to me. And after that, I thought always that I am not virgin. And I always thinking about virginity because they told me that a woman who hasn't virginity, she cannot find a husband. And for all my life, from age 5 till when I was 28, I thought always about virginity. Imagine in the world, the people do a lot of things. They go to the ocean and they see the animals. They go to South Pole and conquer it. They go to Mars. Mars,
yes.
They want to go to moon. And all these things. But I thought only about virginity. And one day I became very tired. And I told to myself, enough to think about virginity. Write something about virginity and let it be for the other people.
Yes, I suppose, well, I know that the reaction was quite strong in Iran when you wrote about a theme like virginity, because that was a thing that one was not, you talked about it in the families, but that was not a thing that was supposed to come in literature, in books. It was not a theme for a book. So how was the reaction from your public and from the authorities in Iran when the book Women Without Men was first published?
Yeah. A woman, an important woman, she شکایت کرد.
She?
از من شکایت کرد.
She protested against you, or she claimed?
Yeah. And the government arrested me for this book, and they told me it's against Islam. Then after that, it wasn't against Islam, so they wanted to hurt me because of the book. And so I was in prison around 2 months. And then I came out from the prison.
It must have been hard to be imprisoned because of writing a book. And then when you were sitting in prison, you were not sitting there maybe with other writers. What situation were you in when you were in the prison in Iran?
First, I was in prison before this book. And in 1981, they arrested my family and me, and we were in prison. I was in prison for 4 years and 7 months without any accusation.
Okay.
And after that, I wrote a novel. Its name is Hvordan, the Meaning of Night. And it became very famous. And I found a very important situation. My publisher published Woman Without Men. And they found a reason to arrest me again.
Okay.
And I was in prison 2 times because of this book. The first time around 2 months, and they released me with a
caution in Norwegian, that you have to pay to get out. Was it so?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they put the home of my aunt.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And they released me. Mm-hmm. After that, I wanted to go to other countries because the Iranians invited me around the world because of the tuba and the meaning of night. Mm-hmm. And I must return back the home of my aunt. So I went to the office and I told them, arrest me and release the home. Mm-hmm. And for the second time, I was in prison.
Oh, poor you.
Yes.
You have really had a hard life. We can't really imagine how this must have been to be in prison like this. And yeah. But you have written about your memories in one book also, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah. You have the memoirs.
Yes, I have a memoir about my life.
Yeah. Yeah. But how have these arrestations affected your work afterwards? Have you been able to? I think if I have been in prison, I would think it would be very difficult to write something afterwards. Well, you have written your memoirs, but other things. How has it been difficult to write afterwards after having been imprisoned?
Yes, because in Iran, my books became banned. Mm-hmm. I hadn't any permission to publish them. Mm-hmm. I wrote the book and I had another book, Blue Logos. Mm-hmm. I published this book out of Iran, in Sweden and in the United States.
Yeah.
And so the situation was the way that I must leave the country. Mm-hmm. Because I had not any security in Iran. Mm. So I came to the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you tried to have a bookshop for some time also, didn't you, in Iran?
Yes. Mm-hmm. After prison, after the long prison, 4 years and 7 months, I opened a bookshop. Mm-hmm. I worked there. But every month I had to go to the government office to sign something to show that I am in the country. Mm-hmm. And one day they told me, who comes to your bookshop? Mm-hmm. I became very angry because I found that I hadn't any security to have a bookshop. Mm. I closed the bookshop. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Yes, I think we're going to talk more about your book now. This book, Zanan bedun mardan, The Women Without Men. Some people say that this is magical realism, that you use the nature as a metaphor, and in many ways the book is quite realistic, I would say, but it is also unrealistic. And is magical realism a genre you would call it?
Yes. In the history of Iran, history of literature of Iran, we have another book, Thousand Night and One. Mm-hmm. Did you read this book?
No, well, I've not read the whole book, yes, but 1001 Night is a known book for everybody in the world, yes.
Yes. In English, they told it was Arabian Nights.
Yes, that's right.
But in reality, it's Iranian Nights.
Yes, it's a Iranian book.
Yeah. And so this book is magical realistic. And of course, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who liked this book very much, he made the magical realism. And some people think that I am the follower of Marquez.
Okay.
But when I wrote The Woman Without Men, I didn't know Marquez. This is my job, myself.
Yeah, because I also seen the connection to this Latin American literature, but you hadn't read Marquez before, so but they have some similarities. Yes, I can see that. So
because of 1000 Night.
Yeah, that too.
1001 Night.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about these women, these 5 women in your book. I think they are very fascinating, very different girls or women. They are different age, they come from different backgrounds. And the first one we meet is Mardocht, who is she has stopped working because she thought that this colleague of her was coming her too close, so she was then in the garden of her brother. And this Mardocht is a fascinating person because she starts realistic, but then something happens to her. How did this story come to you about Mardocht, who becomes something else than a woman afterwards, than a human being?
I don't know. I read a book. In this book, the people went to Siberia. And the writer mentioned that they were good cultivated in Siberia.
Okay.
They were like the trees in Siberia. And this was the idea that I wrote about Mardocht, and she became a tree.
Yes.
But somebody told me, when somebody wants to be a tree, it means that she or he searches the identity. I'm not sure, but this is the idea of psychology.
Yeah. And she has the idea that afterwards her seeds would spread around the world and everybody would grow these Mardocht trees around. I think that's a very fascinating idea. How did you get this idea?
It came to me, but I don't know why.
No. Yeah. There is a situation that Mardocht in the garden, she witnesses the gardener and the girl who works in the house, in the greenhouse. Was that a rape or was it not? The situation with this gardener?
Oh, it's a make love. It's a sex. It's not rape.
No, okay. Because I know that in some, I read someplace that people talked about this as a rape. I didn't see it as a rape first because I thought she was active as well, but then she wanted to stop because Mardocht saw them, and then this violent situation happens. And I think you are quite brave who could write something like that in Iran at that time. I think it would be even worse and even more difficult today to write about such a scene. But I think it's a realistic idea. It is. This was the first woman we know in the book, and then we come to Faize. She is also an interesting person. Did you have any models for her, or how did this character develop for you? Could you say something more about Faize?
I look at other women around me.
Okay.
And Faize had a mother. One of my cousins, she was like her, and so I made it by her idea.
Yeah. Okay, and Faize has the friend who is Munes. Munes, we meet, she has a very round face and she dies and she comes back to life and she dies again and comes back to life again. Tell us about her. Tell us about why this idea, where did you get the idea about, and what did you want to tell us about this, that she comes back to life again?
When you want to be changed, when you want to be a new person, a new character, you must die first. And after that, you become another person. So for Munes, it's like this. She dies 2 times. And from a very simple woman, simple daughter, girl, she become a professor, of a teacher. She become a teacher. Become a teacher.
Yes. Yeah. And this lady, the Farokhlaqa Sadr al-Divan Golchehre, she has a really long name. And she's the one who then buys this garden outside Teheran in Karaj, where all they gather afterwards. She is very different from the other women in the book.
Yes. She's strong.
She's strong, yes, she is. Yes. And she had this idea of, she wanted to start some sort of literature house in this house in Karaj, outside Tehran. The idea of French salons, maybe, where artists come together, writers, poets, painters. But that wasn't very... It didn't quite turn out as she wanted to, with her poetry herself.
So she's not a poet, but she wants to have a salon. And so it's the idea that she has a garden for herself. And so this is Farokhlaqa.
Yeah, and then she has actually had a relationship to a man earlier. She was unfaithful to her husband.
Yes.
Yeah. So all these things you are writing about, I think all of them together must in a way have been provocative for the authorities, and maybe for very traditional readers as well.
Yes, but the problem was not Farokhlaqa. They like Farokhlaqa because she shows a face of the corrupt people. So they hadn't anything against her. But they were against Munes and the idea of virginity and the things like this.
Yes. And the last woman we get to know in the book of these 5 is Zarin Kolah, meaning hat, golden hat. Golden Zarin. Zarin means golden and Kolah, hat. She was a prostitute and very young when she started. I think that story is quite a strong story to hear, that she started being a prostitute, having several customers at a very early age.
Yes. She is a prostitute from age 8. And I think she's 26 years old. And she changed.
Yes, yes.
And she became an innocent woman.
So I think now is the time to hear you read a little bit for us from this chapter about Zarin Kolah. You're going to read it in Persian first, and afterwards I will read it for our Norwegian public here in Norwegian, and then we will continue our talk afterwards. So please, when you're ready.
زرین کلاه 26 ساله و فاحشه بود. در شهر نو کار میکرد. خانه اکرم طلا. اکرم 7 دندان طلا داشت. برای همین بعضی ها او را اکرم 7 صدا میزدن. زرین کلاه از بچگی آنجا بود. سالهای اول هر روز و هر شب بین 3 نفر الی 4 نفر مشتری داشت. در 26 سالگی مشتری ها رسیده بودند به رقم 20 نفر، گاهی 25 نفر و گاهی 30 نفر. زنی کلاه از فشار کار خسته شده بود. چند بار پیش اکرم شکایت کرده بود. ابتدا جوابش قارولون بود و بالاخره یک بار کتک خورده بود و خفه شده بود. زنی کلاه زن بانشاتی بود. همیشه بانشات بود. چون موقعی که بین 3 نفر الی 4 نفر مشتری داشت که حالا که باید تا 30 نفر را هم میدید. همیشه بانشات بود. چاشنی شکایت‌هایش هم همیشه چند شوخی بود. زنها همه دوستش داشتن. ظهرها وقتی با هم نهار می‌خوردن، زنی کلاه شوخی را از سر می‌گرفت. دور سفره قرمز می‌داد و می‌رقصید و زنها از خنده ریسه می‌رفتند. چند بار قصد کرده بود از خانه برود. زنها جلویش را گرفته بودند. می‌گفتند اگر زنی برود خانه سوت و کور می‌شود. شاید همین زنها اکرم هفتی را برای کتک زدن تشویق کرده بودند. زنی کلاه هم به واقع هیچ وقت قصد نداشت برود. چون اگر از این خانه میرفت لابد باید یک راست میرفت به خانه دیگری. یک بار در 19 سالگی ممکن بود برود که خواستگاری پیدا کرده بود. یک عمله جاه طلب که خواب بنا شدن میدید و به زن کارآمد احتیاج داشت. بعد وقتی پیش از اون که تصمیم بگیرن کله مرد در دعوای بابیل به 2 قسمت شد. زن کلاه هر چند گاهی شکایت میکرد اما سرنوشتش را پذیرفته بود. باشم همینجا.
Yes, you can continue a little bit more maybe.
اما حالا 6 ماهی بود فکرش درست کار نمیکرد. مشکل از اینجا شروع شد که شنبه‌ای صبح از خواب بلند شد، آب خورد و آماده شد تا صبحانه بخورد. اکرم هفتی داد زد زنی مشتری آمده، خیلی عجله دارد. صبح زود همیشه مشتری کم بود، خیلی کم، مگر آنها که شب مانده بودند و هوسکی در صبح به سرشان میزد. زنی کلاه آن صبح شنبه فکر کرد خب به درک که مشتری آمده که آمده باشد. دلش میخواست فکرش را داد بزند که به جای او اکرم هفتی داد زد زنی با تو هم میگویم مشتری آمده. زنی کلاه از خیر صبحانه گذشت یا در لحظه گذشت. با قیز برگشت به اتاق، روی تخت خوابید و پاهایش را از هم باز کرد. بعد مشتری آمد. مردی بود که سر نداشت. زنی کلاه حتی جرأت جیغ زدن نداشت. مشتری بی سر کارش را کرده و رفته بود. فکر کنم تو همینجا بود.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you. I will now read this passage in Norwegian for our Norwegian public here. Zarin Kola. Zarin Kola var 26 år gammel og prostituert. Hun arbeidet i den nye bydelen Shahrnush i huset til Gull-Ekrem. Ekrem hadde 7 tenner av gull, derfor kalte noen henne Ekrem med de 7. Zarin Kola hadde vært der siden barndommen. I de første årene hadde hun hatt mellom 3 og 4 kunder i døgnet. I en alder av 26 hadde kundetallet steget til 20, noen ganger 25, andre ganger 30. Zarin Kola var lei arbeidspresset. Flere ganger hadde hun beklaget seg til Ekrem med de 7. Til å begynne med hadde hun fått surmuling til svar, men til slutt fikk hun juling. Deretter holdt hun kjeft. Zarin Kola var en munter kvinne. Hun var alltid i godt humør, like mye den gangen hun hadde 3-4 kunder, som nå når hun måtte betjene opp til 30 personer. Hun var alltid glad. Selv når hun klaget, var det alltid på en spøkefull måte. De andre kvinner likte henne. Når de spiste lunsj sammen, begynte Zarin Kola alltid å spøke. Hun pleide å danse hoftevrikkende rundt matbordet, og fikk de andre kvinnene til å krøke seg av latter. Flere ganger hadde hun hatt til hensikt å forlate huset. De andre kvinnene hadde hindret henne i det. De pleide å si at hvis Zarin Kola dro, ville huset bli stille og kjedelig. Kanskje det var de samme kvinnene som hadde oppfordret Ekrem med de 7 til å gi henne juling. Egentlig hadde Zerinkola aldri hatt til hensikt å reise derfra. For hvis hun forlot dette huset, kom hun sannsynligvis til å dra rett til et annet hus. En gang da hun var i 19-årsalderen, ga det seg en mulighet for henne til å dra. Det hadde dukket opp en som ville gifte seg med henne. Det var en ambisiøs bygningsarbeider som så for seg at han kunne bli byggmester, og derfor ville ha behov for en kone som kunne ta i et tak. Men før stakkaren fikk bestemt seg, fikk han delt hodet i to med en spade i et slagsmål. Selv om Zerinkola klaget fra tid til annen, hadde hun akseptert sin skjebne. Men i løpet av det siste halvåret klarte hun ikke lenger å tenke klart. Det hele begynte da hun sto opp en lørdag morgen. Hun hadde drukket vann og var klar til å spise frokost, da Akram Edishu ropte, «Zeri, det er en kunde her. Han har det travelt.» Tidlig om morgenen pleide det alltid å være få kunder. Veldig få, bortsett fra dem som hadde blitt natten over og fikk lyst til litt mer neste morgen. Denne lørdagsmorgen tenkte Zerinkola, til helvete om det er kommet en kunde. Han er her, hva så? Hun hadde lyst til å rope ut det hun tenkte, men i stedet var det Akram Edishu som ropte. Zeri, jeg snakker til deg. Jeg sa det har kommet en ny kunde. Zeri ga avkall på frokosten, eller hun utsatte den en stund. Sint gikk hun tilbake til rommet, la seg på sengen og skrevet med bena. Så kom kunden inn på rommet. Det var en mann uten hode. Zerinkola turte ikke så mye som å skrike. Den hodeløse kunden gjorde sitt og gikk sin vei. So that was the Norwegian translation of the same book. Yeah. And yes, this scene is a very grotesque scene somehow, I would say. And it's that makes the whole change for her, for Zerinkola. She then really afterwards left. I'm not going to tell the whole story of the book. Maybe people have not read it, so they can read it then afterwards. And the interesting thing is that I have seen the movie that Shirin Ashad has made on basis of your book. That was first video installations, and then she made it into a movie afterwards. And I think you have played a little role in that film, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes? I was so amazed. I saw the film several years ago, and I saw it again now when I was translating the book. I said, oh, there we have you yourself, yes. How was it to play in the film and to see your book being made into a movie?
Shirin Ashad wanted to make this film, and she had problem with the actress. Because being a madam was difficult for Iranian actresses.
Yes.
And it's difficult. So she asked me to play this, and I accepted. And
so you played this Akram, yes. And I think you enjoyed being an actress as well. I think I saw your face. You were so happy when you were playing. I think you. That was so. Yes, yeah. And I like your book, and I like the film as well. I think they are very unrealistic, but they are very realistic as well. This combination of the magical thing and their realism, and. Yeah, it was interesting that you have played in it. And now we are going now to get to the last point of our talk today. I think it's amazing that your book has got a renaissance in a way, because it has now been reprinted, and you may have made a digital version of the book that you sell from the United States, and it has been sold. And it has been translated into very many different languages around the world. So it has been revitalized and has a renaissance today.
Yeah, it has translated more than 30 languages.
30 languages? 13?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
30.
Sorry?
30.
30. Oh, 30. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Let us now go to the last point. We're going to talk about Iran today, and about the situation of Iranian women today, about the situation of Iranian authors, and also about women writers in Iran. What is your impression? Do you have contact with Iranian writers today, especially the young generation, young women who are writing?
Not really, because my name is taboo in Iran, and I don't want to bother the writers. Because I think if I contact them, perhaps they found a problem with the government. Mm-hmm. So I don't try to contact them. Okay. But it's something very interesting. I wrote the second novel of a woman in Iran. But now we have more than 500 writers, mm-hmm. women writers, and they publish every year a lot of books. Mm-hmm. And so the situation is very different mm-hmm. from the moment that I began my work.
Yeah. But you and others with you have somehow paved the way. They have opened the doors for the younger generations to come and to write as well. And today we have more women writers in Iran than we have male writers. Women are those who write books, and they write about women's lives, women's thoughts, and many of the readers are women as well. And they somehow recognize their own lives in the books that women write today.
Yeah. Yes, it's right.
Yes, so the impression that people in the West might get is that Iranian women they are not they are shy. They don't dare to write anything. But that is not the case. They are really the strong figures in Persian literature today.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Shahrnush Parsipur. You have. It has been a pleasure for me to talk to you here today, and to get the Norwegian public to meet you as well. And you have had a lot of experience through your lives through the political turmoil in Iran in the 1950s. You have been through the rapid modernization of the country in the 1960s and 70s during the Shah. And you returned to the Islamic Republic after 1979, and you got imprisoned several times, as you said. But you are now a very important voice in the modern Persian literature, and you have written several books, and you have been met by Iranian authorities' disapproval, criticism, censorship, and imprisonment. But you are not going to be stopped. Your books are translated into more and more languages, and they are read by more and more people. So it's an honor for us to have you here today. Thank you very much.
Yes, I think I want to tell you something. In Denmark, my book becomes a bestseller. Mm-hmm. I hope in Norway also.
Yes, I hope so too.
Find a good success.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.